one for sure, possibly two. The one I typically do on this thing is on this Palatine process. Okay? Either for the Palatine process in the maxilla, and another one, the medial Palatine suture, or the transverse Palatine suture. That one's also a fair game. Transverse goes across. Transverse Palatine suture. You see, in a cleft palate, situation, the median Palatine suture fails to fuse. It fails to fuse, and it comes up like this, and it is the cleft palate situation, which now they can deal with that pretty good, pretty well, surgery and all that kind of stuff. I mean, that can be dealt with. But anyway, that's where that comes in. Okay, any questions over the maxilla bone? Everybody okay with the maxilla? All right, the next one, where's your sheet? All right, after maxilla, we had frontal bone. Don't worry about the frontal bone. I mean, the frontal, all right, this thing right here is the calvarium. Here is the frontal bone. That is the frontal bone. Now, here on this frontal bone, if we do it, let's see, I don't know how to, if I had it like that, maybe, right here, if you can see way over here, that's the orbit of the eye. Right here is that what do we call it? The arch, what's it called? Superciliary arch or ridge. I don't usually do that. Right in the center would be the glabella. Don't usually do that. I don't do much. The only thing on the frontal bone, later in the test, on the frontal bone, let's see, it goes that way. Later in the test on the frontal bone, I won't just ask frontal, I may ask the suture. This thing right here, remember, is the coronal suture. The one going this way is the sagittal suture. The one at the very back, let me scoot it up like this. The one at the very back right here is squamosal suture. Sagittal suture, coronal suture at the front going across. Sutures. What type of joint is a suture? It's a synarthritic joint, which won't be on the test yet. It will be on the next test. That's an immovable joint. This is actually classified as a joint of the body. Okay? So there with the frontal bone, you don't really get all hot and bothered about the frontal bone.
So you are going to ask one of those?
Yeah, I will. That's somewhere at some point on the test. Usually it's been toward the end of the test. When I run out, I kind of say, well, what do I want to ask now? Toward the end of the test, I usually have a suture. Typically now, either this coronal or the sagittal. Typically. So that's been the sutures. The sutures. What do you remember when we first started the bones and we talked about little bones between the sutures? You remember the name of those bones? Anybody? Starts with a W. You got it. Wormian bones. That's just a name for suture. Here on this one, if I can turn it right, get the position right, you might not can see, but right here is they fixed in on this fake skull. That represents a big wormian bone right there. See, it goes all the way around. That's a wormian or sutural bone. That's just showing one on that. Okay, everybody okay? Everybody? No? Which one? That one toward the back. It's called squamosal. In fact, you'll see that sutures there. You'll see them. You'll see the term